writer friends and critique partners. How do you make them? Where do you find them? This is something that's come up quite a few times as a video request. So I thought I'd sit down and have a chat about it. Having good writer friends really is invaluable to a writer career. I have had many good writer friends over the years, and they all bring different benefits to one's life. You'll have maybe one friend who's a great critique partner, one friend who's a great sounding board when you're stuck, one friend who's just great at bolstering your spirits, one friend who's great for talking about business. If you're lucky, you might have a friend who's good for all of the above. Some of my best writer friends have been people who write different genres than me. Some of them I've even read their books and didn't completely connect with them. So it doesn't always have to be someone that you love their writing itself, although if you didn't have some respect for their writing, that would probably be a little harder. And some friends I've known for like over 10 years, and I've been meaning to read their book that entire time, and I still haven't done it. And every time I think about it, I'm like, I can't believe I haven't read one of their books yet. So all this is to say that your writer friends don't necessarily have to be compatible with your actual writing. With critique partners, it's a bit of a different story. Ideally, you do want your critique partners to be people that you really like their work and they really like your work. Otherwise, the critiquing is going to be a bit of a slog and their suggestions might not quite match what you're intending to do. I'll circle back to that in a minute though. My name is Lydia Foxglove and I'm a fantasy author. I've made my living as a novelist since 2009. Quick note, a few of you asked how things were going with my demonetization of the channel because stupid North Carolina sold out their ID printing to some third-party company that is completely incompetent and they weren't issuing IDs, but my expedited passport arrived and I only lost monetization for exactly 1 week. Yay, that was really annoying and unnecessarily stressful, but at least it's over. Such relief. Anyway, so how do you make writer friends? Well, it's not easy to make friends, is it? The internet reminds me every other second that we are living in a loneliness epidemic. This is especially true when you're in the middle part of your life, your 30s, your 40s. In the midpoint of your life, a lot of people that seem like they'd like to be friends with you are either raising kids or just working super hard or both. Sometimes you can also add an aging parent to the mix. And even though you've just met them and you're really clicking, they probably also have some old friends. So you're competing with a lot when it comes to making new friends and actually having time for them, probably both in your life and in theirs. But I'm not telling you anything that you probably don't already know. There are friends that if they messaged me and said, hey, I'm in your town right now. Do you want to go grab a coffee? I would be like, oh my gosh, yes, that is like the most exciting thing. I'm going to drop everything. I'm going to clear my schedule. I will be right down at the coffee house. I can't wait to see you. I'm going to squee all over you. But I have not initiated contact with this person in like 10 years. So that's midlife. Pretty much all of my best writer friendships have been maintained over the internet. Currently, we do have an in-person fantasy writing group in Asheville, which is great. I'm very thankful that we've managed to stick with it. Even through the pandemic, we met on Zoom so we wouldn't lose track. It's really nice to have some kind of in-person writing talk. But this is the first place I've lived where I've had that for this length of time. It's always worth looking to see if there is a local writing group you can join. I think there's a lot of benefit to having a local group, but often you don't have that. And sometimes if you do, they're just not the right fit for you. And no one in my fantasy group is currently writing for a living. And usually my best writer friends are the ones who are writing for a living just because they're not only my friends in what we like to do, but also can commiserate over the career side of it. They're my coworkers, basically. It really helps to have people that are at a similar stage to you, whatever stage that is, because you will share the same experiences at that level and can help each other along. So how do you make those first baby author friends? At first, you're probably going to be joining groups. Find groups wherever you can for your genre. the more niche, the better. Like, it's better to have young adult fantasy group or cozy fantasy group or grimdark fantasy group versus just fantasy group, because you're going to already have people a bit winnowed down into a similar thing that you're writing. And it might be a little easier to make friends. Although I do feel like the internet as a whole is just harder to make friends than it used to be. Social media sites really want to take your money and sell you things more than they want to connect you with your friends. And a lot of my writer friends I've known for so long that they date back to when the internet was not like monetized within an inch of its life. So I don't think I'm crazy when I say it's a little harder to make friends when you're working with a site that really wants you to click on an ad and buy something, not to make a friend. But nevertheless, this is the glorious world we have to work with. It's fun, isn't it? Pretty soon you're going to find out that your new friend is actually an AI that Google is testing. When I started, I didn't have any critique partners, very few writer friends. I had a few people I'd met back on like the AOL teen writer group. I met people in the most random ways. Like, for a while I was friends with another published young adult author, but I actually met her because she was my sister's friend first. And my sister was like, oh, I have a friend who's really serious about writing. So then we started talking, and I think we ended up talking more than her and my sister ever did. But that was super random. And we both became published young adult authors. But in the beginning, I joined a website called Critique Circle. It looks like it's still around, although I haven't used it in a very long time. But the way Critique Circle would work is that you had to critique a few other people's works first, and then you'd kind of get like points or whatever that then other people would critique your work. That way it kind of kept it fair, and you were guaranteed to get some critiques. If I remember correctly, you would tend to get more critiques if you were already a little bit good, which already kind of tells you something that you might need to work on things if no one wants to critique your stuff at all, even other struggling writers. That's kind of a sad thing to acknowledge. But, you know, if you're just struggling to get anyone to critique your work, you probably want to dig into the craft before doing anything else. But if you just want author friends, you might have to extend your hand a little bit, especially in the current environment. You are probably more likely to get a positive response if you approach people with enthusiasm or helpfulness, and if those people are at a similar level to you. A lot of people think that it's better to approach people who are more advanced than you because you will learn more from them, but people that are farther along than you are often already bombarded by people who want advice. They're not trying to be snobs, they just like literally don't have time to answer every query. I mean, I have been asked for help with writing by accountants that I have hired, and, you know, your mom's friend's friend, you know, like every random person in your life. People slide into your DMs, people in your real life will come to you like, oh, hey, my cousin wants to be a writer. Could you like sit down and tell them how? As soon as people know that you've had any level of success as a writer, every newbie wants to talk to you. So you do end up putting up some walls just out of preservation of your time, because you're going to have to take a lot of time to write. So it's always better to approach people that are at the same place as you, that aren't going to have that little defense mechanism activate when you try to talk to them. It's good to try something like, hey, I saw your post about the book you're working on. It sounds so cool. Are you looking for critique partners? I'm working on a book about X. You know, let me know if maybe you want to swap some chapters, or maybe you saw a post where they're struggling with advertising and you know a little bit about the topic, or you're in the middle of the same struggle and you message them like, hey, I saw your post about Amazon ads. This worked for me. You know, if you ever want to kind of compare notes on how things are going, sounds like we're in a similar place. That's always a good place to start, because you're kind of offering something, and also, you know, you're offering kind of a mutual exchange from a similar place. But writer friendships can definitely be hard because, you know, let's face it, we're talking about a bunch of introverts and awkward people, a lot of neurodivergent people, a lot of people who don't get out much. It has also happened to me many times that I really like someone and I really want to be their friend. They're clearly not that into me. And meanwhile, I have someone else who seems like they clearly want to be my friend and I'm not quite that into them. I'm convinced this is some kind of humanity-wide joke that the gods play so they can be entertained by us. I don't know, but it happens. But sometimes I'll have someone approach me that I really wanted to be their friend, and I was a little too shy. Maybe I thought they're a little too cool for me. I don't want to bother them. And then they'll reveal that they wanted to be my friend or my critique partner. And then it's like, yay. So in that respect, it's good to go out on a limb now and then. You might get rejected. Welcome to writing. Everything gets rejected. So let's talk a little more about critique partners specifically. And a lot of people seem to feel that they must be critiqued by a more experienced writer. And I really don't think that is necessarily true. I mean, it's nice if you can get a critique from an experienced writer, but like, I don't have great editorial skills, truly. And one of the best critiques that I ever got was a friend of mine who has not done a ton of writing. She's a manga translator, and she really knows her stuff when it comes to manga and anime storytelling, JRPGs, all the stuff I'm into. So when she read my book, her suggestions really clicked with the kind of thing that I'm into, and she was really good at pointing out areas where I could kind of delight my reader self. It was one of the best critiques I've ever gotten. Unfortunately, I didn't even get to implement it because the book ended up selling really quickly, and then I had an editor that wanted a different direction. I still wonder sometimes, like, what would have happened if I could have just done her rewrite instead. So sometimes the most astute observations on your story don't come from an experienced writer. They come from someone who really likes the kind of story that you are attempting to tell. When I first got critique partners, I would take anybody I could get. I got a lot of critiques from people who really did not understand what I was doing. And it took me some time to understand what critiques to listen to and what ones to just disregard completely. It can be especially hard in the beginning because you might be just so nervous about getting any kind of critique. You're really not quite ready for criticism of any kind yet. So you're not good at separating the good from the bad, because an ideal critique should make you feel excited to get back to work. It should resonate with you. But sometimes when you're new, nothing makes you excited because you're not really that good at figuring out how to change things yet, and you're also just so anxious about everything that any kind of criticism makes you just never want to share anything or write anything ever again. But I feel like the solution for this really is not to hide, but to get more critiques, because the more critiques you get, the more you'll start to realize that some of them are not very good critiques and that others are starting to click in your mind. And there's also starting to be repeated patterns with critiques. If a lot of people are saying the same thing, then it probably is worth considering. Unless everyone that you're pulling from is from one group that maybe doesn't get what you're doing. Like if you're very young and all of your critique partners are old enough to be your mom or your grandma, they might not quite get what you're doing. Or if all your friends are obsessed with Colleen Hoover and you are writing something that's the complete opposite of that, then, you know, it's possible that they might not be giving you the best advice for what you're doing. So you do have to consider if you're getting any critiques from the people who would be your audience. But generally, if something's coming up over and over, it probably is something that you want to take a look at. It can be hard if you're trying to do something that's a little different. I've gotten so many weird critiques about the Hidden Lands books over the years because they were a little unusual. And it took me a long time to figure out how to write those books in a way that would be accessible to an audience. I do want an audience, but without losing the meanness of them. Like, it really has taken a while. And I think in a lot of ways, I had to take a step back and write to market for years just to find out what kind of writer I really wanted to be. It can be hard to figure out that thing that's uniquely you that you do want to hold on to no matter what. And such is art. You never know for sure. You'll probably cycle through a lot of critique partners early on, but hopefully at some point you're going to meet someone that you kind of click with. You like their work, they like your work, the critiques are helpful, you're both benefiting from it, and critique partners are a great way to make friends. But so is sharing the hunt for an agent or your indie publishing trials and tribulations. Critiquing each other's blurbs and giving each other marketing advice can be just as good of a grounding for a friendship as anything else. And another question that I got was, is there any drama in writing communities? Which, you know, obviously, yes. There are humans there is drama. But I assume the question meant, is there any particular drama to writing communities? I think the biggest potential source of drama is the huge disparity in how a career can shape up. It can be very hard not to be jealous when you have a friend whose work really blows up. That's only human. For me, the longer that I stayed in it, the less jealous I became, because I just realized how many changes in fortune can occur over the course of a career, and that usually everyone's going to have some big ups and downs if they stay in it, and that just kind of helps smooth the edges of jealousy down considerably. But let's presume that you were never jealous, or you were jealous and you've gotten over it. You're not jealous of anybody, so you should be able to make friends with anyone no matter how famous they are, right? Well, I'm still not sure. And the reason why is that someone who becomes extremely successful in their writing career may start to have experiences that are just so different from what everyone else is going through. Whenever I see people talking about a famous author saying that they're bitchy or they've gotten too big for their britches, I always wonder if that's true, or if they're just like having a hard time being honest or talking to people, sharing their experiences. But basically, if they're just having a hard time coping with what's happening to them. It's kind of like when a friend has children and suddenly they're your friend, you love them, and you want to support them and not lose the friendship on both ends. It's just that their experiences and the things they want to talk about and work through are so different from what a childless person is going through that you might both be having a hard time communicating for a little while. I've had some very famous author friends who went on book tours for their publisher, and the idea of being invited on a book tour has always given me a certain level of terror. Like, you want to be invited on a book tour because it means that you're doing very well and everyone loves you, and nobody wants to say no to that. But it also sounds so terrible. I thought that it was going to be this glamorous thing, but it really sounds more like you're getting on a plane, people are telling you where to go, you're just kind of traveling with your headphones, and then you're suddenly somewhere and someone drives you somewhere, you're talking to a room full of people, you have to be entertaining for a little bit, and then you go alone to your hotel, and then you got to get up early to catch the next flight to the next city. It sounds so stressful. I can be pretty extroverted when I'm in my element and I'm around book people, but what would terrify me about it is that I hate travel, I hate planes, I hate not being fed or not having access to the kind of food that I want, or like healthy food. I miss my cats. I miss Dade. I don't like a lack of control. I don't like being alone in hotel rooms. So if I did become famous and I was invited on a week-long tour, I would be freaking out. I'd be scared. I would want to talk to my friends and have them reassure me that it's going to be okay. But I also would feel bad to sound like I was complaining about being sent on a book tour, because it's kind of the dream, right? Especially if your friend is struggling and your friend's like, oh man, my publisher just turned down my book, or my indie release isn't really doing as well as I hoped, money is a little scary. You don't want to be like, I'm freaking out about my book tour. And I don't think that authors are, as a whole, prepared for fame and attention at all. Like, why would we be? 99.9% of the time, we're just like cave trolls with our laptops. And then this tiny minority of authors ends up being asked to become celebrities and talk to a bunch of people and do events and signings and interviews. And it's like the most introverted artistic career you can have. Like, I've been the kid with a sketchbook, like the teen with a sketchbook. And when you have a sketchbook, people will come up to you all the time and look at your sketchbook and be like, oh wow, you're really good. What are you drawing? That's cool. Who's that? That doesn't happen when you're typing in a corner with your laptop, unless someone is really emboldened and curious. It's so much rarer than with a sketchbook. And if you're an actor or a musician, you've gotten somewhat used to performance or performing with other people. Authors just get very little attention, very little public anything, unless they get to that point where suddenly they're famous, suddenly have to pivot. And I don't think a lot of authors are really equipped to cope with that mentally and emotionally. A lot of famous authors end up having like anxiety. So I think that can be a source of tension in author relationships. And I'm using extreme examples like book tours, but just in general, there's a lot of disparity between relationships that can affect things. I mean, I have friends even now who are doing so many more things that have bigger fan bases. So, you just don't have as much to say when people are doing different things than you. And then I got a question about how to combat loneliness and isolation. Apparently become a celebrity and get invited on a book tour. No, I'm kidding. I do think it's important to get yourself out of the house now and then, even if you are not super inclined to leave your house, which I am often not. I usually have to somewhat force myself out the door, even when it's something I enjoy. It's nice to have like a monthly thing you do, whether it's a writing group, Dungeons and Dragons, book club, just something that gets you out where you're kind of like, oh, I gotta be a part of this to keep the group going, or so I don't let people down. It's nice to have a little bit of something to force yourself out the door. Not too much. Not too much. Part-time jobs are also good. I'm better at making friends at a job than I am in a social setting, because if I'm feeling a little shy and introverted, there's always work to do and you can just be quiet. But if you do feel like talking, you can talk, and there's always work stuff to talk about. You're making a little extra money. And if you're working in a service job, you might be meeting people in your community, especially if it's a place that has regulars. So if it makes sense for your life, part-time jobs are nice. I mean, assuming that you don't already have a job, which most of you probably do already have a job. I also think that if you can get out and do something that just has like a proven happiness factor that is separate from writing, that's always good. Exercise, nature, volunteering, and helping other people. These are all things that kind of give humans a boost, and you're not going to get a lot of nature and exercise writing unless you dictate things while you walk around outside, which I do actually do that with my YouTube scripts. That's not social though. But if you're trying and you're still just not really connecting to anyone, if you feel like no one around you is your people, it's worth considering moving. That's not something that you can just like do instantly, but I know I've often underestimated how much your location can affect the kind of people that you're around. Particularly when I was younger, my family never moved. I grew up in the same house, same area my whole life, and I just kind of assumed like this is how people are. There's a lot of different people here, and this is how people are. It wasn't until I moved away to different states that I realized that like every little area is actually quite different, and you'll run into very different people and very different attitudes, different cultures. It's much easier to make friends in Asheville than it has been in other places that I've lived, because this area is just known for like artsy weirdos. So no matter where you go, chances are good you're talking to an artsy weirdo, which is great if you're trying to make friends and you are an artsy weirdo. I think that pretty much covers all the basics for writer friends and critique partners. I do have it on my list to do a separate video just on critique partners, how to give good critiques, how to get good critiques. So I'll get into more depth on that at some point. If there's anything else that I didn't cover, or if you have any tips for just how to make friends in this crazy world, let me know. Drop them in the comments. And of course, there's always more cats and dogs. They cost some money to maintain, but I feel like my cats actually save me money, because I never want to go on vacation because I'm like, the cats will miss me and I'll miss the cats. So, that saves a lot of money when you're not really tempted to leave because you miss your cats so much. I would also love any tips or suggestions on how to build better communities. I'm trying to make my Discord a place that really builds a community, but it's not always easy to get people past like the casual acquaintance stage into a place where you're really making friends and it really has some real value in your life. So I'm thinking about that a lot in the back of my mind, and I would just, if you've built a great internet community somewhere, I'd love to know how you facilitated that. And of course, if you'd like to check out the Discord, it's available with the $5 Patreon tier. But if not, I'm just really happy that you're here with me today. It's always so much fun to chat with you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye! The buttons on this dress are so interesting. They're not really a button at all. They're like a little... They have a little pin that you pull out, and then you can get it out of this tiny hole, and then there you go. I've never seen that before.